YMCA. Go ahead.
It's fun to stay at the YMCA. It's fun to stay at the YMCA.
I don't relate to you, no.
I'm a single childless cat lady who's allergic to cats, and we're not going back.
We have the power to make morons go extinct like dinosaurs.
Because of the election. It's not because, like, you're missing a tooth. No, I don't think that's it.
When it comes to Starbucks, have we lost the plot?
The structure of the story doesn't make sense.
How come?
Though they probably will look like this walking into the White House.
Did you know that I can see you?
As the dust settles following U.S. election results, the world is adjusting to the prospect of 4 more years of Donald Trump. Depending on which side of the aisle you are, the future either looks bright or terrifying. Or maybe it's just more of the same. I'm Anelise Borges, and this is The Stream.
This is a magnificent victory for the American people that will allow us to make America great again. Oh,
In what some saw a surprising comeback, President-elect Donald Trump won the Electoral College and the popular vote and made promises to fix what he calls a broken America in his victory speech. Social media platforms exploded with users weighing in on some of the biggest campaign talking points, from reproductive rights to immigration to military spending and possible nominations for the next administration. And so, to help us get a clearer picture of what the next 4 years would look like, we have joining us today Kai Polanco, a digital creative and co-founder of FEMINIST on Instagram, Elizabeth Booker Houston, a lawyer, political commentator and comedian, and Maribel Hernandez Rivera, the Director of Policy and Government Affairs, Border and Immigration at the American Civil Liberties Union. Thank you all so much for joining us here on the stream today. I think a good way of getting us started here is by going through the platform that got Donald Trump re-elected. And for that, here's DonaldTrump.com, ladies and gentlemen, and his Agenda 47. Number 1 at the top there, seal the border and stop the migrant invasion. Number 2, carry out the largest deportation operation in American history. Maribel, you moved to the United States from Mexico at the age of 13. Your father was still considered undocumented the day he died after living and working in the U.S. for years. You've dedicated your life and your work at the ACLU to protecting the rights of immigrants. With Trump's victory, and seeing this is essentially a top priority for him, what are your thoughts on his stance on migration?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I have to tell you that when I look at his policies, when I look at what he did during his first term, we know that a new Trump administration is going to be far more cruel than it was before. And I can tell you that during the first Trump administration, cruelty was the name of the game. We knew that children were taken away from the arms of their mothers. We saw children being caged. We saw people from predominantly Muslim countries being banned from coming to the United States, and we had to go to court to stop that policy. So, you know, as somebody who came to the United States, who has family in mixed statuses, I know that people who are immigrants who come to the United States come here and they contribute to society. We know that there's many reports that show that it is because of immigrants that our economy has held strong. And so it is really heartbreaking for me to see that we are entering 4 years where cruelty is the name of the game. We are seeing the advisors that he is having, and these are the people who were the architects of family separation, who were the architects of the Muslim ban.
Would you say you're afraid today? Do you feel afraid?
Yeah, yes, my husband has something called temporary protected status. He's from Honduras. President Trump, during his first administration, attempted to end that status. And back then, we were worried that our family was going to be torn apart. And here we are again. But I'm going to tell you what, we're ready to fight. At the ACLU, we've been preparing for this moment. We fought the Trump administration during the first time, and we will do it again.
And immediately after Trump's victory, there was one particular TikTok trend that caught our attention.
Black folks, take y'all back to Starbucks. Go get your mocha frappuccinos.
Social media users calling for an end to the Starbucks boycott, which had been going on for a year to express solidarity with Palestinians, many of whom believe that the chain supports Israel and has links to the country's ongoing war on Gaza, allegations that Starbucks denies. Now, some are suggesting that those who did not vote for Kamala Harris to protest Biden's policies in the Middle East are to blame for her loss. Elizabeth, what do you make of this reaction, of this sentiment, and of the fact that people are so determined to blame someone for Trump's victory?
Right. So when it comes to the Go Back to Starbucks movement, in my conversation with the Black women who have made videos or comments regarding that, the common sentiment that I found is that they are more so rejecting the performative allyship of this movement. As many people pointed out over the months, Starbucks is not funding the IDF. They don't even have stores in Israel and haven't since 2003, if I'm not mistaken. Many people like myself have been boycotting Starbucks because of union busting or racist practices within their stores. But for some reason, Starbucks got co-opted in the movement for Palestinian liberation. And to be quite honest, it was a performative movement online that simply gave a lot of mostly white progressives in America reason to shame and attack people, especially Black women who they saw may have a Starbucks cup in their video or what have you. I even recall posting a very old video from a few years before I had boycotted Starbucks where I was drinking out of the cup, and I said, oh, this video is a few years old but still relevant. And immediately, rather than paying attention to the caption or the message of the video, there were white progressives ready to tell me, well, you should be boycotting Starbucks, not even understanding that, again, it was an old video and I haven't had Starbucks since I can't remember. But it just goes back to this frustration of a lot of the performative nature, again, of white-led progressive movements in America that ultimately fizzle out and don't really have any benefit to the historically marginalized people they claim to want to help. And so Black women seeing this and understanding that it's honestly more so just a social media trend to portray solidarity rather than actually create solidarity, and finding that, now we feel very unsafe because of the second Trump presidency. They don't see the need in playing the game, so to speak, and trying to appease the people on social media.
Very important points that you bring there. Donald Trump obviously overcame a pretty large gender gap as well after polling terribly with women ahead of elections, understandably so, perhaps with multiple allegations of sexual abuse and rape against him. The response online following his win was eye-opening, maybe more so about his supporters than anything else. That Nick Fuentes post on X on November 6 saying, "Your body, my choice, forever," has been viewed more than 97 million times and reposted more than 36,000 times. In 24 hours, there was a 4,600% increase in mentions of the phrase on X. "We own your body" was also trending on TikTok, although many of the videos featured women speaking out against the trend. Many women actually pushing back online said they would like to join South Korea's 4B movement. Google searches for the movement went up by 450%, with 200,000 people looking into it the day after the election. And we asked Bo Kyum-King, a reporter at South Korea's Arirang News, what the 4B movement is exactly and why something that emerged in South Korea resonates so deeply with women in the U.S. today.
In 4B movement, B is not an alphabet B, but rather it means saying no in Chinese character. So it basically means saying no to 4 things: Pihon, no marriage; Pichusan, no childbirth; Piyone, no dating; and P6, no sex with a guy. And this is not a movement that emerged overnight. It was part of broader response to gender violence, especially ignited by 2016 murder at the Gangnam Station, where a man who was a stranger to a victim stabbed her to death in a public bathroom. For the reason why South Korea's 4B movement has become widely adopted by American women after Trump's victory in presidential election, Trump is already well known for his sexual misconduct allegations, with dozens of women already having accused him of sexual misconduct, and also faces criticism for appointing 3 of the justices who overturned Roe in 2022. I'm pretty sure Trump's actions, his words already were enough to spur American women to embrace Americans' own version of 4B movement that stemmed from South Korea, quite worried about their abortion rights in America.
Kai, your thoughts on this and on your body, my choice. Would you say that that sentiment is aligned with what you predict for women under a Trump presidency?
I mean, as you said it, there's been a 4,600% increase of hate speech online, masked as anti-woman hate speech. So, I mean, when you take a step back and you look at what's happening in the physical world, the online world is very much a manifestation. So we've seen a progressive move towards right-wing extremism happening all across the world. And so, of course, online is going to represent what you're seeing in person, and you're going to see people kind of just feel emboldened to perpetuate that harm. So, and then looking even further, and not only did we see that hate speech towards anti-women, there's also in 24 states, the Black community, the LGBTQ plus community, and the immigrant community saw disturbing text messages received on their phones the days after the election. Wow. So this is very much like an intersectional fight. We're seeing that, the systems that continue to oppress us are something we've always known, rooted in misogyny and white supremacy. And so, of course, that would exist online. I think it's up to these major platforms to look at what's happening and build policies and protections so that we can continue to fight this and also feel like we have the tools and resources to see how we can dismantle some of this online rhetoric.
It is quite disheartening to read some of the comments around that discussion. Elizabeth, let's have a look at another item here on Donald Trump's Agenda 47, number 16. Cut federal funding for any school pushing critical race theory, radical gender ideology, and other inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content on our children. I mean, what does education under Trump look like?
Well, there have been threats about completely getting rid of the Department of Education. I did make a video explaining that I don't think that is likely because it would require a congressional act to essentially repeal the statute that gives the Department of Education its authority. That's how our administrative agencies work here in the United States. I teach it to my law students, and administrative law can be very complicated, but it is a lot more than a president simply deciding that a department shouldn't exist. Now, the scary part is that they can still cripple a lot of what a department does or hurt a lot of their programs by not funding them to the extent that they need the funding. Also through regulatory power, which is rulemaking, that is something that falls under the president's authority under the executive branch. And so I do predict that when it comes to education, we will see that they will cut funding for as many programs as they possibly can, as well as pass regulations to really hurt protections for, say, LGBTQ plus students, as you read in the agenda, to try to come after any school that teaches about race in a way that they find unacceptable. The language is so broad, it's so vague, that it really can mean anything. There are, of course, some safeguards to try to stop a lot of this or slow it down, but as we saw with the first Trump administration, this is what happens to a lot of agencies that Donald Trump views as being negative or being in opposition to the administration. He will impact them through regulatory means and also through, again, funding.
Maribel, I mean, as we're discussing here, a lot of it will come to the legality of it, right? Some of the promises that Trump has been making throughout the last few months might not be legal. As a lawyer, the promises, for example, of mass deportation, is that actually something that he can do? I know the ACLU has already brought a lawsuit against the federal government for more information. You also called on Biden to codify safeguards before he leaves office. Did anything come of that?
Yes. Well, speaking of the legality of his actions, I think it's really important to remember that during the first Trump administration, he was not worried about what the legality was, right? So we have seen that what he does is he just enacts his policies regardless of the legality. So we had to go to court during the first Trump administration more than 400 times because he was violating the law. So when he, for example, was ripping apart families, we went to court. When he enacted the Muslim ban, we went to court. When he tried to add a citizenship question to the U.S. Census, we went to court. We won many of those cases. And at the same time, we know that one tool in our toolkit is not going to be enough. Litigation is not going to be enough. We need to be in the courthouses. We need to be on the streets because, for example, with the family separation policy, we were in the court and we were able to slow it down, stop it. But really what happened was people getting to the streets and saying, not under my watch. You will not use my tax-paying dollars to enact your cruel policies. So we are ready to come to court, but we are ready beyond that. We have 50 affiliates nationwide who are ready to make sure that we turn out our members. We have 4 million members ready to say, no, not under our watch.
And obviously, that is going to be more important than ever, especially for, as you said, families, because we talk about statistics, right? These are real people. We're talking about children, parents, grandparents. I mean, Elizabeth, still in terms of legality here, we sometimes have the impression that US presidents are, I don't know, above the law somehow, because, I mean, whether it's the criminal case against Trump being effectively dismissed, or Biden pardoning his son, there seems to be a way to avoid jail time when you know the right people. What do you think the future of incarceration and policing in the country will look like?
I think the first thing we need to remember is first the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment is the amendment that was passed to outlaw slavery, but there's a clause in there that says, except as punishment for a crime. We saw in California, for example, this past election cycle, they had the option to say on their ballots that they did not want prisoners to essentially perform slave labor, free labor as part of their punishment anymore. It did not pass in the state of California. And I do fear that the Trump administration is going to use that clause, that exception in the 13th Amendment, just to their benefit as much as possible and to the detriment of US citizens. I think we will see incarceration be more dehumanizing. We will see it be more dangerous for the inmates that are in these prisons, federal prisons, as well as state prisons under the governors who support Donald Trump and receive support from him as well. So that is my biggest fear with incarceration, as well as just not making sure that inmates have what they need, basic necessities, things that you just need as a human being. Again, as I said before, it's very dehumanizing in these incarceration systems in the United States. And it does seem like oftentimes the president is above the law. As I said, there are guardrails in place, but you know, there are always ways for rich white men to get around these things, it seems.
Isn't that so? Staggering. 2024, and here we are still facing that reality. Kai, what now? I mean, what is your plan? I saw a call for collective care and community organizing on the feminist profile. What does that look like for you personally and as an organization in terms of the next 4 years?
I think that what we're seeing in terms of the rise of hate speech, these extreme bills being passed around gender-affirming care and transgender youth, or proposed national abortion ban, or proposed mass deportation, all confirms that the feminist movement is needed now more than ever, and that women will probably lead the revolution. So what does that look like? It looks like continuing to build coalitions online and offline for us to amplify the voices of change makers around the world. For people personally, it looks like not looking away, continue to engage, if you see something that feels empowering, like it, engage with it, because we need more good information being spread in the world than this harmful information. It looks like continuing to educate people. So educating people across our various platforms and doing that online through most notably at Feminist and providing people with the good information that shares like what issues are happening and what's at stake in this new administration, and ultimately informing people to inspire them to take action. Taking action looks like investing in care. So investing in care means supporting local abortion funds, you know, practicing mutual aid, directly supporting and funding organizations like the ACLU or creators like Elizabeth here, who are on the front lines of protecting our equality. And it also looks like continuing to support feminist media publications. We know that media publications that, you know, don't align with this new administration's point of view are on the chopping block. And we have to subscribe, we have to continue to support and donate to all these publications that aren't going to have the support from the federal government.
Stand shoulder to shoulder, basically. Maribel, what about your roadmap? You mentioned this at the start, getting people still involved in this fight, and not only online, but also in the streets. How are you and the ACLU working to protect human rights during the second Trump presidency?
Yes, I love what Kai said, because there's so many ways we can get involved. And basically what we need to do is meet power with power. And so how we are powerful. The people of the United States, what we have seen in poll after poll is American people do not want cruelty. And that's what the Donald Trump agenda looks like. Nothing but cruelty. That's not what Americans want. We have seen it again and again. So on the streets, that's one way. Also, state and local governments, they have a lot of power to resist these policies. So part of our road plan has been to work with state and local governments to say, no, you will not use our resources to enact your cruel policies. We have seen, for example, the governor of Massachusetts saying, I'm not going to be engaged in your mass deportation cruelty. We have seen the governor of California do the same. Many localities can do that. And so that's another way. And of course, we, for 100 years, we have been in the courts. We have been fighting whatever policy that comes around, regardless of the administration, and we will do it again. But one thing that is really important to note is that this will take all of us. It will take all of us to protect each other. It will take all of us to speak up and say when things are happening so that we can make sure that the American people see the cruelty that is happening. And it will take all of us to really support each other and protect our rights. Because even though we know this is going to be hard, we're clear-eyed that this is going to be far more cruel than before, we also know that our democracy is strong and our democracy depends on all of us, and all of us can do something to support each other.
Elizabeth, you posted on Instagram that you were meeting at the Capitol to talk congressional staff about moving forward. It seems like for you too, the fight isn't over. What are you going to be fighting for?
Well, I'm going to be fighting for our rights as much as I possibly can. I'm fighting to protect vulnerable communities. It's definitely daunting. I've made it through one Trump presidency before here in Washington, D.C. I am confident that I can make it through another. In that meeting with congressional staff, we talked a lot about the resistance side of things and how there is a resistance that is prepared within the Capitol walls to try to rebut any sort of Trump-era policies that can harm people. People like Maribel who go to court, and fight against this administration. It's so important. And as Kai pointed out, the community level support as well, donating to the local abortion funds. But I'm going to suggest something that is a little less exciting and sounds a little more boring, but it is important. We do have something called the Federal Register, and it is public, and it is where the United States citizens can comment anyone on any proposed regulations. And I really am going to be encouraging my followers to become familiar with the Federal Register over the next 4 years and to actively take time to put these comments in. Because for every comment, the agencies have to consider this and the law to meaningfully consider before any of these regulations can pass. And by putting as many of these comments in, as many as we can, just as US citizens, and forcing the Trump administration to review our concerns, it not only makes them take pause on passing these rules, but it also creates an administrative record that makes it easier for folks like Maribel who would sue in court against the Trump administration to have a piece of evidence for that as well. So not the most exciting thing, but I do think that administrative law is another good way to really, as just a regular common citizen, make your voice heard and also fight against a lot of these very harmful policies.
And that's an excellent initiative and idea. Thank you so much, Kai, Elizabeth, and Maribel, for being part of this stream. Thank you for your time. And thank you all for tuning in. Stay in touch with us on social media. You can use the hashtag or the handle AJStream to send us your questions and suggestions. Take care, and I'll see you soon.